Hello, my name is Bev Springer, and I'm going to be doing a reflection over the course Teaching Students with Mild to Moderate Disabilities. This has been a great course. I will say that it's summertime, and trying to find a student to work with during the summertime made this a little bit different, a little bit more difficult, I think, to accomplish some of the things, but we made it through. I was able to find a student. I was able to get all of his stuff gathered up before the normal school year ended so that I had the resources that I need to go ahead and do the teaching for the class. But it did make it a little bit different. Overall, I would say that there was learning by the student and by myself, and that's why we're here for, so I think that that is great. When looking at the golden thread and working with my student, the first thing I needed to do was check his present level, see where he was at. He had just had his IEP meeting recently, so I had all the numbers, the data, everything that I needed to kind of grasp where he was at. I also had been working with him all year, so I had a pretty good indication of his strengths, his weaknesses, areas that he really needed some help with. He was diagnosed with autism. He also has some ADHD. His reading comprehension and reading fluencies were very behind. He just came out of a life skills class last year into the resource special education classroom, which meant he was also in some co-taught science and social studies, but he was in the more focused English and math classes for the year. Because he has a slower processing speed, he would often let other people do work for him. Not really for him, but when we were doing classroom assignments and I asked for volunteers to read or asked for people to answer questions, he was always a little late to the game. I would give him that processing time and call on him specifically, but sometimes because of his ADHD, he was also not super focused in, and I'd have to repeat questions. But I really wanted to focus on getting him to be able to understand his reading more and to read more fluently so that he had more confidence going into it so that he could participate more in class. So using information from the IRIS modules and also What Works Clearinghouse, I was able to develop a plan for him that would maybe help increase that confidence and help in those areas for him. I was going to have to use evidence-based practices in order to teach him these new skills. And the ones that I use included obviously the modeling with the I do, you do, we do process, which is something I guess I've kind of always done and just didn't realize it was an evidence-based practice. And my colleagues also we use graphic organizers a lot during this. He already knew how to use a graphic organizer in writing, so he knew how to use it to construct writing, and so it was kind of fun to teach him how to use it to deconstruct writing to see what really the main ideas that an author was trying to get across and the information he really needed to retain instead of all kind of the fluff that was in the middle of that. We also used activating his prior knowledge, which is something that I learned a lot about and know that I need to use a lot more when I could give him hands-on or some visuals, which is also an evidence-based practice for children with autism, and give him those visuals, and his looking at questions before we read, those really kind of helped him to understand what he was reading. I was teaching him to read with prosody, which was a word that I learned. I was unfamiliar with that word, so it was nice to learn that word and understand what it means. And now that I have a word to fit a definition I already had, I feel like I'll be able to use that a little bit more. When I explained it to my student, I told him he sounded like a robot sometimes when he was reading, and we did not want to read like this. And just giving him that example and using a vocabulary term he could understand tied with the prosody, then he was actually loosened up a little bit and started reading a little more fluently and with more prosody during that time. I gave him visual supports and comprehension strategies. He had already been highlighting answers for me throughout the year when he was answering comprehension questions, but pre-reading those questions before he started, or as Covey says, beginning with the end in mind, he was able to comprehend and his brain was able to pick up on the things while he was reading that he needed to keep track of. So those pre-reading activities really, that was really driven home for me during this. I would say that that was probably my biggest knowledge gain moment of the course, was looking at those. As far as my data goes, because it was summer break, I collected that a little differently than you would normally collect it. Instead of doing it every week or every few days or every couple of weeks, I had to do it every single time we met. So we met 4 times. I collected data all 4 times. When I would collect, I would immediately put it into my data collection sheet so that I had it, and add it to my graph so that it was already there and I didn't have to mess with it later. One tweak that I made from what I usually did, instead of counting words per minute read for fluency, I was reading words correct per minute read, which adjusts those number a little bit, but really what we're looking for. So that was another skill that I kind of learned during this time. As far as my personal growth, I think it was just learning about evidence-based practices. Again, these are things that my co-teachers that I push into their classes and I work with have already been using. I spent so much of the year reading through evidence-based practices or this course saying, oh, she does that. Oh, they do that in class all the time. Hey, I've seen him do that before. So it was very cool to see that those teachers that are sort of mentoring me are already using those evidence-based practices, which in turn has already caused me to use them. Just I didn't have a word for them. I just thought they were neat ideas. And so it's good to know that the stuff that I'm already using and the stuff that is being modeled for me in classrooms as well is stuff that's already been proven to work. And I can continue to use those moving forward. I still do find it sometimes hard to find. I wish there was just a list. And I know there's What Works Clearinghouse and some Irish modules and some other readings that we have where we could find them. For the writing evidence-based practice, there was sort of a list, and I grasped onto that. In the busyness of school, what I would like to do is find some and make my own self a list that just shows, drawing from these different sources, what are the things, so that when I'm trying to plan a lesson, I can look and I can say, hey, they're not grasping this. What can I do differently? And I can pull out my list and go, oh, okay, I can do, and I do, we do, you do, or I can spend some time with some graphic organizers with these students to help them out. And when my brain is not clicking on what I need to pull out, just have that list in front of me. So that's something I'd really like to put together. If I could do this during a regular school year, that would be something I'd like to do different, just because I was using one-on-one, which is like that tier 3 of the MTSS. But I don't know if it was that one-on-one that was helping my student more, or if it was the evidence-based practices. I'm sure it was a combination of both, but it would really be great for me to know which one was kind of pulling at him more, which would help me then when I go back to the full classroom to know which things I could put more energy and focus into a little bit more as well, because I'm getting more impact out of them. And then again, the other thing on the question about what would I do different, what gaps do I have, it's just finding those EBPs quickly. That's what I'd like to be able to do. As I move forward, I want to be intentional about using those EBPs in the classroom. I want to continue to study ways to find how to help my students the most. And when I look at the golden thread, I want to understand where each student is, where they're at, their current levels, where they're at, then set the goals for their student, both long and short-term goals, and then use those EBPs for instruction, monitor their progress, and then repeat that cycle. A thread does not stop after its first pass through the material or through the fabric. So I want to make sure that I keep weaving it through there, and as it's woven through all that I do, stitch by stitch, using the right thread, I can create stronger students able to stand up to any educational challenge that comes their way. So that's kind of what I got out of the class. Thank you so much for teaching it. I really enjoyed it, and thank you.